My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and at 32, I discovered what family truly means when my sister handed me a $3.120 dinner bill on my birthday, stating coldly that I should find another spot because I wasn't real family. That moment shattered 2 decades of memories and launched a journey that would expose generations of secrets, betrayal, and ultimately deliver the most unexpected justice to those who thought blood defined loyalty. Hey everyone, before I dive into the most painful family drama of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story of family betrayal and sweet karma resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real talk and healing. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, when I still believed being adopted meant I was chosen, not excluded. I was adopted when I was just 3 months old. According to the story my parents loved to tell at every family gathering, they had tried for 5 years to have a child naturally before deciding to adopt. My mom, Elizabeth, would always tear up when she described the moment they first held me, a tiny baby, with curious green eyes and a tuft of red hair. "We knew instantly you were meant to be ours," she would say, squeezing my hand. 2 years after they adopted me, my mom became pregnant unexpectedly. My sister Vanessa was born when I was nearly 3 years old. She entered the world with the Mitchell family's signature dark hair and blue eyes, a perfect genetic reflection of our parents. Despite our obvious physical differences, my red hair and green eyes stood out in family photos, like a poppy in a field of bluebells. I never felt different growing up. At least, that's what I told myself. Our childhood home in suburban Connecticut was comfortable, filled with the normal chaos of a 2-child household. Dad worked as an investment banker, and Mom balanced part-time work as an interior designer with raising us. They provided everything we needed: good schools, summer camps, piano lessons for Vanessa, soccer for me. From the outside, we were the picture of an upper-middle-class American family. But there were subtle differences in how my parents treated us. Vanessa's achievements, her straight A's, her flawless piano recitals, her popularity at school were celebrated with elaborate dinners and expensive gifts. My soccer trophies and art contest wins earned me smiles and quick hugs, but rarely the same level of enthusiasm. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being oversensitive. After all, they had chosen me, hadn't they? They must love me just as much. As we entered our teenage years, the gap between Vanessa and me widened. She blossomed into a mini version of our mother, poised, socially adept, and fiercely ambitious. I was more like my dad's sister, Aunt Claire, creative, a bit awkward, preferring books to parties. Aunt Claire was my favorite person in our extended family. She never had children of her own, but she treated me with a warmth that sometimes felt missing from my immediate family. She would take me to art exhibits and independent bookstores, encouraging my creativity in ways my parents never quite understood. "You're a Mitchell through and through," Aunt Claire would say, just from the branch of the family tree that appreciates the beauty in unexpected places. I clung to those words, especially during family gatherings when Grandma Mitchell would fawn over Vanessa's resemblance to her late husband, while barely acknowledging me. By the time we reached college age, Vanessa and I had established an amicable but distant relationship. She went to Yale, following in Dad's footsteps, while I chose a smaller arts college in Massachusetts. We'd text occasionally and see each other at holidays, but we weren't close confidants. I chalked it up to different interests and personalities. I never suspected there was anything more sinister brewing beneath the surface. After college, Vanessa moved back to Connecticut and took a job at Dad's firm. I stayed in Massachusetts, building a career as a graphic designer and eventually starting my own small agency. I'd come home for major holidays and occasional weekend visits, but I'd created my own life away from the Mitchell family dynamics. I dated, made friends, established myself professionally. From the outside, I appeared to have successfully launched into adulthood. But inside, I still carried the little girl who wondered why her achievements never quite measured up, why her presence at family gatherings felt tolerated rather than celebrated. I'd spent years in therapy working through these feelings, telling myself that adoption was beautiful, that my parents had chosen me out of love, not obligation. I believed that blood didn't define family until the night of my 32nd birthday, when everything I thought I knew about family was turned upside down in the most humiliating way possible. I had no idea that the birthday dinner Vanessa insisted on planning would become the moment where the facade cracked wide open, revealing the ugly truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. I had no idea that walking into that restaurant would be the first step toward discovering who I really was, and what the Mitchell family had been hiding from me for nearly 3 decades. "Lexi, you have to let me plan your birthday this year," Vanessa had insisted 3 weeks earlier during our monthly phone call. "You're always so independent, but turning 32 deserves something special." I was surprised by her sudden interest. Vanessa had never made much effort for my birthdays before. Usually it was a text message or a generic gift card that arrived a few days late. But she seemed enthusiastic, even warm on the phone. "I've reserved a private dining room at Maison Bleu," she continued. "Mom and Dad are so excited, and I've invited Aunt Claire, Uncle Robert, and a few of the cousins. It'll be the first big family gathering since Christmas." Maison Bleu was one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, with a 3-month waiting list and prices that made my small business owner heart palpitate. But Vanessa had connections everywhere, and the thought of my family making the effort to come to me, rather than me always going back to Connecticut, felt like a meaningful shift. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That place is really expensive." "Don't worry about it," Vanessa laughed. "It's all arranged. This is my gift to you." So on the evening of May 15th, I dressed in my favorite emerald green dress, the one that matched my eyes and complemented my copper hair. I spent extra time on my makeup and even splurged on a blowout. For once, I wanted to look like I belonged in the Mitchell family photo, even with my different coloring. The private dining room at Maison Bleu was stunning crystal chandeliers, crisp white tablecloths, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston Public Garden. When I arrived, my parents' Aunt Claire and a few cousins were already seated at the long table. Vanessa stood at the head looking impeccable in a tailored navy dress, her dark hair swept into a sleek updo. "The birthday girl is here," she announced, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You look lovely, Lexi. Green is definitely your color." The dinner started pleasantly enough. Wine flowed freely and the conversation stayed light. My father told stories about his recent fishing trip. My mother showed photos of her newly renovated kitchen, and my cousins updated everyone on their children's achievements. I felt a warmth spreading through me. Maybe this was a turning point in our family dynamics. Then came the champagne toast. Vanessa stood glass in hand and the room quieted. To Alexandra, she began using my full name in a way that suddenly felt formal. 32 years ago, you came into our lives and changed everything." There was something in her tone that made me tense up. "I was only 2 when you arrived, but growing up with you has been an education." My smile felt frozen on my face as she continued. "You've always been different from the rest of us." She gestured around the table in your looks, your interests, your choices. "But I suppose that's to be expected." Aunt Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My mother stared at her champagne flute, refusing to meet my eyes. "To Alexandra," Vanessa concluded. "May you continue to forge your own path wherever it may lead." The toast felt more like a dismissal than a celebration, but I clinked glasses and tried to maintain my composure. As we moved into the main course, I noticed the conversation had subtly shifted. Family stories were being shared, but they were all about bloodlines. How cousin Michael had grandpa's chin, how Vanessa had inherited mom's perfect pitch, how the Mitchell blue eyes had persisted for generations. I felt increasingly invisible, like I was watching my family from behind glass. Aunt Claire tried to include me a few times, bringing up my recent design award and asking about my current projects, but her efforts were quickly overshadowed by Vanessa's louder stories. By dessert, an elaborate birthday cake had been brought out, but I'd lost my appetite. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. When I returned, I found the table arrangement had changed. My chair had been removed and my place setting cleared away. "Oh, there you are," Vanessa said, looking up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We've decided to move on to coffee and digestives. Why don't you find another spot, maybe over by Aunt Claire?" I stood there confused. "But there are no other chairs." "Well," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could hear, "this section is really for family, you know. Real family." The table fell silent. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother suddenly became very interested in her napkin. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice sounding small, even to my own ears. "I am family." Vanessa's laugh was sharp-cutting. "Come on, Lexi. We've all been playing along for 3 decades. But let's be honest, you've never really been a Mitchell. You don't look like us, you don't think like us, you don't fit. You're not blood. You're just an addition." The room seemed to spin around me. I looked to my parents for defense, for denial, but my father was checking his watch and my mother was signaling for the waiter. "I think it's time we stopped pretending," Vanessa continued, her voice gaining strength as she saw no one contradicting her. "Mom and Dad did their duty. They raised you, educated you, launched you. The obligation is fulfilled." Aunt Claire stood up abruptly. "That's enough, Vanessa. Alexandra is as much a part of this family as you are." But Vanessa merely shrugged. "Is she, though? Maybe in your bleeding heart world, Claire, but not in reality. Not where it counts." Before Aunt Claire could respond, the waiter appeared with a leather folio. "The bill, as requested," he said, placing it on the table. "Perfect timing," Vanessa said, picking up the folio and handing it directly to me. "Since this was your birthday celebration, I'm sure you'll want to handle this." I opened the folio and nearly gasped. $3, 120.47. For a dinner where I'd just been told I didn't belong. "There must be a mistake," I stammered. "You said this was your gift to me." "Did I?" Vanessa tilted her head in mock confusion. "I meant the invitation was my gift. The experience of dining with the family. One last time before we all move on with our lives separately." I looked around the table waiting for anyone to object, to tell Vanessa she was out of line to grab the bill from my hands. But no one moved. My father checked his email on his phone. My cousins studied their fingernails. My mother dabbed at non-existent crumbs on the tablecloth. Only Aunt Claire stood up, her face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. I won't be part of this ambush." She grabbed her purse and came to my side. "Come on, Alexandra. We're leaving." But Vanessa's next words stopped us both cold. "Before you go storming out, Claire, maybe you should tell Alexandra the whole truth. About why Mom and Dad adopted her in the first place. About the family secret you've all been keeping from her. After all, if we're ending the charade, let's end all of it." Aunt Claire's face drained of color. "Not like this, Vanessa. This isn't your story to tell." "Well, it's certainly not yours," Vanessa retorted. "You've had 32 years to come clean, and you've chosen silence every time." I stood frozen between them, the bill still clutched in my hand, feeling like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. "What are you talking about? What secret?" My father finally looked up from his phone, his expression unusually grave. "Vanessa, that's enough. This isn't the time or place." "When is the time, Dad?" After another decade of pretending, after we've all wasted more years maintaining this ridiculous facade, Vanessa turned to me, her blue eyes, those Mitchell blue eyes glittering with a strange mixture of triumph and resentment. You want to know why you were adopted, Lexi. It wasn't because mom and dad desperately wanted a child. It was because they desperately needed to hide one. My mother made a small pained sound like something breaking inside her. Please, Vanessa, don't do this. But Vanessa was relentless. You weren't chosen out of love, Lexi. You were chosen as a cover-up. A distraction from the scandal that would have ruined the precious Mitchell family name. Aunt Claire grabbed my arm. Let's go. You don't need to hear this garbage. But I think I do, I said quietly, pulling away from her. The room had taken on a surreal quality, like I was watching the scene unfold from above. What scandal? My father stood up abruptly. That's enough. This discussion is over. He reached for his wallet, pulled out a credit card, and handed it to the hovering waiter. Put everything on this. And bring us our coats. No, I said, finding my voice. I want to hear what Vanessa has to say. I have a right to know. Vanessa smiled, a predatory curve of her lips, finally showing some backbone. Maybe there's a bit of Mitchell in you after all. She leaned forward. The scandal, dear sister, was that our perfect mother had an affair with Uncle Robert's brother Thomas. Remember him, the black sheep who disappeared to Europe 35 years ago. He got mom pregnant, and rather than admit the affair to dad, she convinced him they should adopt a baby, to explain her pregnancy. Then they'd claim the adopted baby was Vanessa, and no one would be the wiser. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. That's insane. That would mean I'm their biological daughter and you're just some random baby they picked out to serve as my stand-in while mom was pregnant with me. The ultimate prop in a family drama. That's not true, my mother said, but her voice was weak, unconvincing. Isn't it? Vanessa challenged. Tell her, Mom. Tell her why she was really brought into this family. My mother looked at me then, down at her hands. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. But I struggled to make sense of the timeline. If you're 2 years younger than me, how could I have been adopted to cover up your pregnancy? I'm not 2 years younger, Vanessa said. That's part of the lie. I'm actually 4 months younger than you. They fudged my birth certificate and your adoption papers. Small-town connections and Mitchell money made it all possible. I turned to my father. Is this true? He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's complicated, Alexandra. It's not complicated at all, Vanessa continued. They needed a decoy baby, and you fit the bill. Red hair that could be explained away as a recessive gene, green eyes that could be attributed to some distant relative. Good enough to pass a cursory inspection. Then I was born the real Mitchell heir, and they were stuck with both of us. Aunt Claire stepped forward. That's not the whole truth. Vanessa, and you know it. What else is there to know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Claire looked at my father, then my mother, silently pleading with them to step up. When they didn't, she sighed heavily. Your father isn't Thomas, Alexandra. Your biological father is standing right there. She pointed at my dad. What Vanessa and I spoke in unison. Your mother didn't have an affair with Thomas, Aunt Claire continued. I did. I got pregnant, but I wasn't in a position to keep a baby. I was 22, just starting my career unmarried. Your parents, who had been trying for years to conceive, offered to adopt you. It was a private adoption kept within the family. You are a Mitchell by blood, Alexandra. You're my biological daughter and your father's biological niece. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Aunt Claire, my mother, seeing for the first time our shared features. The same green eyes, the same copper hair, the same slightly crooked smile. But I stammered, why the secrecy? Why not just tell me the truth? Because shortly after your adoption was finalized, Elizabeth became pregnant with Vanessa, Aunt Claire explained. They thought it would be confusing for you both to explain that you were cousins being raised as sisters. They decided it would be simpler to never tell you about your biological parentage. Vanessa's triumphant expression had morphed into confusion. Wait, so she's actually related to us? She's actually Dad's niece? Yes, Aunt Claire confirmed. Alexandra is as much a Mitchell by blood as you are, Vanessa, just from a different branch of the family tree. The private dining room fell into shocked silence. My father, my uncle, finally looked at me, his expression a complicated mixture of guilt and what might have been love. My mother, the woman who had raised me, stared blankly ahead, her carefully constructed reality crumbling around her. Vanessa appeared genuinely stunned, her elaborate plan to humiliate and exclude me, suddenly backfiring spectacularly. She was no longer the real Mitchell heir, revealing a family secret. She was simply a cruel person who had tried to weaponize what she thought was my outsider status, only to discover I had been an insider all along. I stood there, the $3.120 bill still in my hand, trying to process that I had just gained a biological mother and lost the family narrative I'd believed my entire life. So, I said slowly, looking from face to face, everyone at this table has been lying to me for 32 years. No one contradicted me. I don't remember leaving the restaurant. The next clear memory I have is sitting on a bench in the Boston Public Garden, my emerald dress inappropriate for the cool night air. Aunt Claire, my biological mother, sitting beside me, both of us silent as the reality of what had just happened settled around us like falling leaves. I wanted to tell you, she finally said, her voice catching. So many times over the years I wanted to tell you the truth. Why didn't you? I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. At first, it was the agreement I made with your parents, with Elizabeth and William. They would raise you as their own, give you the stability and opportunities I couldn't provide as a single mother in the 1,990 seconds. The condition was that we would never tell you about your true parentage. She twisted her hands in her lap. Then, as years passed, it seemed cruel to upend your world. You had your place in the family, even if it wasn't perfect. Not perfect, I laughed bitterly. They treated me like an obligation, like I was less than Vanessa. All those years, I thought it was because I was adopted, but it turns out it was because I was a reminder of something else entirely. Aunt Claire's eyes filled with tears. William loved you in his way. You're his brother's daughter, but also his brother's mistake. It was complicated for him. And Elizabeth, did she ever love me at all? Claire hesitated. Elizabeth agreed to adopt you primarily to save the family from scandal. Thomas was married when you were conceived. His wife's family had connections that the Mitchells needed for business. Exposing the affair would have had consequences for everyone, so I was damage control. Initially, perhaps, but I truly believe Elizabeth grew to love you in her own way. She was never a naturally maternal person. Even with Vanessa, she was more concerned with appearances than emotional connection. I absorbed this, thinking of all the times I'd tried to earn my mother's Elizabeth's approval, only to be met with polite disinterest or veiled criticism. And Thomas, my biological father, does he know about me? Claire nodded slowly. He knows. The moving to Europe story was partially true. He did leave the country, but it was because he couldn't bear to see you raised in his brother's house while pretending to be nothing more than an uncle to you. It broke something in him. Is he still alive? Yes. He lives in Barcelona now. He's never married again. She hesitated. He sends me emails asking about you sometimes. I've sent him photos of you over the years. Your college graduation. The opening of your design studio. The thought that a man on another continent, a stranger to me, had been following the milestones of my life while I remained completely unaware of his existence was disorienting. Does he want to meet me? He's always said that would be your decision if you ever learn the truth. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, watching late-night joggers circle the pond, the city lights reflecting on the water's surface. I don't understand, Vanessa, I finally said. Why did she orchestrate this whole elaborate dinner just to humiliate me? "And why now?" Claire's expression hardened slightly. "Vanessa discovered some old letters between Thomas and me a few months ago while helping Elizabeth clean out the attic. She confronted your parents, who confirmed part of the story that you were adopted as part of a family arrangement to hide a scandal. But they didn't tell her that you're actually William's niece by blood. I think she assumed you were completely unrelated to the Mitchells, and she saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what the family trust." Claire sighed. "William's father left a significant trust fund that gets distributed when William turns 65, which happens next month. The terms specify that it should be divided equally among William's children. Vanessa thought if she could prove you weren't really family before the trust is distributed, she could get my portion." I finished the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just about humiliating me. It was about money. "The Mitchell way," Claire said grimly. "But her plan has backfired spectacularly. You're not only family, you're a blood Mitchell through Thomas. You have more right to that inheritance than she realized." I shook my head, feeling sick. "I don't care about the money. I care about the fact that my entire life has been a lie. That the people I thought were my parents have been deceiving me since before I could talk. That my sister, I stopped. I don't even know what to call Vanessa now." "She's still your sister in the ways that matter," Claire said gently. "You were raised together. You share experiences and memories, even if those memories are now colored differently by what you know." I thought about the $3.120 bill that Aunt Claire had ended up paying before we left the restaurant, about the cold look in Vanessa's eyes as she handed it to me and told me to find another spot. About 32 years of subtle exclusion and conditional belonging. "No," I said firmly. "Vanessa made it very clear tonight how she sees me. And now I see her clearly too." My phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from my father, from William. "We need to talk," it read. "There's more you need to know. Come to the house tomorrow." I showed Claire the message. "More secrets?" I asked, wearily. "I don't know," she admitted. "But whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. I'll go with you if you want." I studied her face, this woman who had given birth to me, who had watched from the sidelines of my life for 3 decades, who had kept the truth from me out of a misguided sense of protection or obligation. I wasn't ready to call her mom, but I wasn't ready to shut her out either. "Okay," I said, "we'll go together." As we left the garden and headed toward my apartment, I couldn't help but think about how quickly one's entire identity could shift. In the space of a dinner, I had gone from adopted daughter to biological niece, from outsider seeking acceptance to blood relative, with arguably more claim to the Mitchell name than the sister who had tried to expel me. I just didn't know yet what I wanted to do with this new identity, or with the family that had hidden it from me for so long. Hey everyone, can you believe we're only halfway through this family drama? The revelations are just beginning. If you're shocked by the dinner scene betrayal, trust me, what comes next will make your jaw drop. Hit like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next part, where we'll discover what other secrets William has been hiding. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced a family bombshell moment like this, and how did you handle it? Now, let me continue with what happened the next day when I went to confront my family. William and Elizabeth Mitchell lived in a stately colonial in Brookline, just outside Boston. They had moved there 5 years ago to be closer to Vanessa after she took a position at a prestigious Boston law firm. I had visited the house exactly 4 times since they moved in. Each visit had been brief, perfunctory, driven more by obligation than genuine connection. Now, as Claire and I walked up the manicured pathway to the front door, I felt like I was approaching a stranger's home. The woman I had called mother for 32 years opened the door before we could ring the bell. Elizabeth looked older than she had the night before, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed behind her designer glasses. "Alexandra," she said, her voice strained. "Thank you for coming." Her gaze shifted to Claire, and something passed between the two women, an old tension, an unspoken rivalry. Claire, I suppose it's appropriate that you're here as well. She led us into a formal living room where William sat in his favorite leather chair. He stood when we entered his tall frame, slightly stooped, his face grave. To my surprise, Vanessa was there too, perched uncomfortably on the edge of the sofa, her expression unreadable. I didn't expect to see you here, I said to Vanessa, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Dad insisted, she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. He said, if we're finally going to be honest, everyone should be present. William gestured for Claire and me to sit. Alexandra, about last night. You can call me Lexi, I interrupted. Or Alex. You never call me Alexandra unless I'm in trouble or you're introducing me to business associates you want to impress. He blinked, taken aback by my directness. Alex, then, what happened last night, the way the truth came out, was not how any of us wanted it to happen. Really, I looked pointedly at Vanessa. Because it seemed pretty intentional from where I was standing. Vanessa had the grace to look somewhat ashamed. I didn't know the whole story, she said. I thought you were. She stopped, reconsidering her words. You thought I was? What, just some random baby they picked up to cover a scandal? A complete outsider you could easily push out of the family and the inheritance? Alex, William interjected. There's more to this situation than you. No. Then enlighten me, I challenged. No more secrets, no more lies, no more protecting me from the truth. I want to know everything. William exchanged a look with Elizabeth, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The trust fund that's being distributed next month, he began. It's substantially larger than Vanessa indicated. My father was very successful, but also very controlling. He set up the trust with specific conditions about how his grandchildren would inherit. And let me guess, one condition was that they had to be biological descendants, I asked bitterly. Actually, no, William said. The condition was that they had to be children raised within the Mitchell household as family. He included that language specifically because he knew about you, Alex. This caught me off guard. Grandpa Mitchell knew I was Claire's daughter, William nodded. He was the one who suggested the adoption in the first place. He knew about Thomas and Claire's affair and about the pregnancy. He saw it as an elegant solution to several problems at once. Claire wouldn't have to face being a single mother in a judgmental social circle. Thomas wouldn't have to confess the affair to his wife and Elizabeth. And I would have the child we'd been unable to conceive. So Grandpa Mitchell, who barely acknowledged me at family gatherings, was the architect of this whole deception. I was having trouble reconciling this with my memories of the stern patriarch, who had always seemed to look through me rather than at me. My father was a complicated man, William said. He believed in family loyalty above all else, but he also believed in maintaining appearances. He wanted to protect the Mitchell name while still ensuring that you, his grandchild by blood, even if not in the conventional way, would be provided for. So, the trust. I began trying to follow the implications. The trust is to be divided equally between you and Vanessa, William confirmed. There was never any question about that, legally speaking. You've always been entitled to your share. I turned to Vanessa. Then why the elaborate scheme to humiliate me and try to prove I wasn't real family? If the trust was already guaranteed to both of us, Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. When I found the letters, I only saw parts of the story. I thought, she broke off, then continued more softly. I thought if I could prove you weren't blood related to the Mitchells at all, I could challenge the distribution terms. The trust is worth over $20 million, Alex. $10 million per person. You thought it was worth destroying me to double your inheritance. I finished for her. To go from extremely wealthy to obscenely wealthy. I didn't think of it that way, Vanessa protested, but her objection rang hollow. There's something else you should know, Elizabeth interjected, speaking for the first time since her terse greeting. About why we moved to Boston 5 years ago. I turned to the woman who had raised me, who had always maintained a certain emotional distance that I now understood in a new light. I assumed you moved to be near Vanessa. Partially, Elizabeth acknowledged. But primarily, we moved because of you. Me, I barely see you. That's by your choice, Alexandra. When you established your design studio here, William and I decided to relocate to be closer to you. We hoped that with proximity might come reconciliation, a chance to repair what had become a strained relationship. I laughed incredulously. Reconciliation requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing. In the 5 years you've lived here, have you once admitted that you've treated me differently than Vanessa? That you made me feel like an outsider in my own family? Elizabeth flinched. We thought we were doing what was best, maintaining the story we'd created to protect everyone involved. To protect yourselves, you mean, I retorted. Not me. Never me. That's not entirely fair, Alex, William said. We did what we thought was right at the time. Perhaps it was wrong. Looking back now, I can see that it was, but our intentions weren't malicious. Intentions don't erase 32 years of feeling like I didn't belong, I said. Of wondering why my accomplishments never quite measured up to Vanessa's in your eyes. Of believing there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of the same love and pride. Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. The simple gesture of support nearly undid me. There's one more thing you should know, William said after a moment of heavy silence. About Thomas, your biological father. My heart quickened. What about him? He's coming to Boston next week. He's been asking to meet you for years, and now that the truth is out, there's no reason to keep him away any longer. The revelation hit me with unexpected force. The abstract concept of a biological father somewhere in Europe was suddenly transforming into a real person who would be standing before me in a matter of days. Did he know? I asked. All these years, did he know where I was, who I was? William nodded. He's kept his distance out of respect for the agreement we all made, but he's never stopped thinking of you as his daughter. He has a photo of you on his desk. Claire sends him updates every few months. I turned to Claire. You told me he asks about me, but not that he has a photo of me on his desk. Not that he's been pushing to meet me. I didn't want to pressure you, Claire said softly. If the truth had never come out, it seemed kinder to let you live your life without that complication. I sat back, overwhelmed by the cascade of revelations. My entire understanding of my family history had been upended twice in less than 24 hours. I wasn't who I thought I was. The people who raised me weren't who I thought they were. Even my position within the family, which I'd always assumed was tenuous at best, was apparently more legally and financially secure than I'd realized. I need time to process all of this, I finally said. I can't just adjust to having a new mother, a biological father I've never met, and a sister who tried to publicly humiliate me for financial gain, all in the span of a day. We understand, William said, though his tone suggested he was hoping for a neater resolution. Take whatever time you need. I stood up suddenly, desperate to escape the suffocating perfection of their Brookline home. I'll consider meeting Thomas when he arrives. But I make no promises about forgiveness or reconciliation with any of you. That will take time if it happens at all. Vanessa rose as well. Alex, I know what I did was unforgivable, but you're right, I cut her off. It was unforgivable. And yet, ironically, you've done me a favor. Without your cruel stunt, I might have gone my entire life without knowing the truth. As Claire and I walked to the door, Elizabeth called after me. Alexandra. She stopped seeming to search for words. I did love you. In my way. I know it wasn't enough, and I know it wasn't the same. But there was love. I paused but didn't turn around. In your way, I repeated. That's the problem, isn't it? Your way left no room for who I actually was. Claire and I spent the rest of the day talking. Really talking for the first time, not as aunt and niece, but as biological mother and daughter. She showed me photos of Thomas that she'd kept hidden away, told me about their brief, intense affair, and how devastated she'd been to give me up, even though she knew she couldn't provide the life she wanted for me as a young, single woman in the early 1990 seconds. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said, tears streaming down her face. Giving you stability, a two-parent household, financial security. I never imagined they would make you feel like an outsider. If I had known, you can't change the past, I told her, surprised by my own capacity for compassion in the midst of my anger and confusion. None of us can. We can only decide what to do next. What I decided to do next would change everything. Thomas Mitchell arrived in Boston on a Wednesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the disastrous birthday dinner. He had texted me. Claire had given him my number, asking if I would meet him at the Boston Public Garden, at the bench where Claire and I had sat the night my world imploded. I recognized him immediately, even though I had only seen photos. He had my red hair now streaked with silver, and the same green eyes that looked back at me from the mirror every morning. He was tall and lean, dressed in a casual elegance that spoke of European living. When he saw me approaching, his face transformed with such naked hope and joy that it took my breath away. "Alexandra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. There was the slightest hint of an accent, Spanish perhaps from his years in Barcelona. "Most people call me Alex," I said, suddenly shy, "or Lexi." "Alex," he repeated, seeming to savor the name. "Is it all right if can I hug you?" I nodded, and he embraced me gently, as if I might break. I was surprised by how natural it felt, how there was none of the stiffness that had characterized the rare hugs I'd received from William and Elizabeth over the years. We sat on the bench, both of us struggling with where to begin after 32 years of separation. "Claire tells me you're a graphic designer," he said finally, "that you have your own studio." I nodded. "Yes, for about 6 years now. It's small, but we do good work. Mostly branding for startups and small businesses." "I'd love to see your portfolio sometime," he said. "If that wouldn't be too presumptuous." "You're an artist too," he smiled. "An architect. But I've always appreciated good design in all its forms." "Claire mentioned you won an award recently." The fact that he knew this detail, that he had been keeping track of my professional achievements from across an ocean, moved me unexpectedly. William had never shown much interest in my work beyond perfunctory questions at holiday gatherings. The Eastern Design Guild Award, I confirmed. For a rebranding campaign we did for a sustainable clothing company. "I'm not surprised," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Creativity runs in our branch of the family. My mother, your grandmother, was a painter. Quite talented, though she never pursued it professionally. It wasn't considered an appropriate career for a woman of her station in those days. Our branch of the family." The words resonated in a way I hadn't anticipated. For the first time in my life, I was sitting with someone who saw my creativity not as a deviation from family expectations, but as a continuation of a family legacy. We talked for hours, filling in the gaps of each other's lives. Thomas told me about his architectural firm in Barcelona, his passion for sustainable urban design, his love of sailing. He had never married or had other children, though there had been relationships over the years. None of them quite worked out, he said. "I think in some ways I was always haunted by what I left behind here. By you and the life I might have had if I'd made different choices. Why didn't you fight to be part of my life?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me since I learned of his existence. He sighed deeply. "I was a coward in many ways. The affair with Claire was wrong. I was married, though it was not a happy marriage. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I let my brother convince me that his solution was best for everyone. Claire would be spared the scandal of unwed motherhood. You would have a stable home with 2 parents, and I would be free to extract myself from my failing marriage. without the complication of a child born outside of it. And were you free? Not in the ways that mattered. He looked out over the pond where ducks glided serenely across the water. I left physically, but I carried the weight of my choices with me every day. The knowledge that I had a daughter growing up without knowing who I really was, what I might have been to her. Did you ever consider coming back, telling me the truth? Many times, especially after Claire began sending me updates about you. But there was the agreement with William and Elizabeth, and I had given my word. And as the years passed, it seemed increasingly cruel to disrupt your life with revelations about a father you'd never known. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everyone was so concerned with not disrupting my life that no one considered how much damage the lies were already doing. Thomas nodded somberly. We failed you, Alex. All of us in different ways. I can only speak for myself when I say that I'm more sorry than I can express, and that I would understand if you want nothing to do with me going forward. I studied his face, this stranger, who was also my father, who shared my features, and apparently some of my talents and sensibilities. I don't know what I want yet, I said honestly. This is all still so new. But I think I'd like to get to know you. To see if there's a relationship we can build now, even if it can never be what it might have been. The relief and gratitude in his expression was almost painful to witness. I would like that very much, he said. However much or little you're comfortable with. I'm staying in Boston for a month, so there's time. As our conversation wound down, I found myself telling him about the trust fund revelation, about Vanessa's scheme to exclude me, about the $3.120 dinner bill she'd tried to saddle me with. That's appalling, Thomas said, genuine anger flashing in his eyes. William always indulged Vanessa too much. I'm sorry you were treated that way. The irony is that the trust was never in jeopardy, I told him. Grandpa Mitchell apparently made sure of that when he set it up. My father was a complicated man, Thomas said, unconsciously echoing William's words from our confrontation. Rigid and traditional in many ways, but with an unexpected streak of fairness. He didn't approve of my affair with Claire, but he recognized that you were innocent in it all and still his grandchild. As we parted that evening, Thomas tentatively suggested dinner the following week. I'd like to introduce you to contemporary Catalan cuisine, he said. If you're interested. I agreed, somewhat surprised by my own willingness to continue building this new relationship. As I walked home, I found myself thinking about family, both the one I'd grown up in and the new connections I was discovering. About belonging and exclusion, truth and deception, loyalty and betrayal. And somewhere between the garden and my apartment, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would not only secure justice for decades of emotional neglect, but would also provide the clean break I needed to move forward with my life on my own terms. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I need to know if I can legally decline an inheritance, I said when she picked up. And if so, what happens to my portion? 3 days later, I invited William, Elizabeth, and Vanessa to my apartment. Claire and Thomas were already there when they arrived, creating a tableau of uncomfortable family dynamics that would have been comical if it weren't so painful. Thank you for coming. I began once everyone was seated in my modest living room. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the trust fund, and I've made a decision that I want to share with all of you. Vanessa shifted nervously while William maintained his usual stoic expression. Elizabeth kept glancing between Claire and Thomas, clearly unsettled by their presence. I'm declining my portion of Grandpa Mitchell's trust, I announced. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock, while William frowned deeply. Alex, that's $10 million, he said. Don't make hasty decisions based on recent emotions. It's not hasty, and it's not based solely on emotions, though those certainly played a part, I replied. I've consulted with my lawyer and the paperwork is ready. I'm officially removing myself from the distribution. But why? Vanessa asked, her voice small. Is this because of what I did? Because I truly am sorry, Alex. It's because of what all of you did over decades, I said. But it's also about what I need to do for myself now. I don't want money that comes with Mitchell family strings attached. I don't want to remain financially tied to people who have made me feel like an outsider my entire life. Where will your portion go? William asked, ever the practical one. That's the interesting part, I said, unable to keep a small, satisfied smile from my face. I've learned that if a named beneficiary declines their inheritance, their portion doesn't automatically go to the other beneficiaries. It goes into a contingency fund that the trustees, meaning you, William, can redistribute at their discretion. William nodded slowly. That's correct. But so I continued, you have a choice to make. You can give my declined portion to Vanessa, doubling her inheritance to $20 million. Or you can follow the alternate plan I've proposed to the trustees. What alternate plan? Elizabeth asked, speaking for the first time. I've suggested that my portion be used to establish the Alexandra Claire Mitchell Foundation for Adoption Transparency and Support, I said. A foundation that would provide resources to adoptees searching for their birth families, advocate for open adoption practices, and offer counseling services to both adoptees and birth parents navigating reunification. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You would create a very public foundation, Elizabeth said slowly, with the Mitchell name attached to it, focused specifically on adoption transparency. Exactly, I confirmed. Every grant, given every family reunited, every piece of advocacy work done, would be a very visible reminder of what happened in this family, of the lies told and the damage done. That sounds like revenge, Vanessa said. I prefer to think of it as justice, I replied. And transformation, taking something painful and using it to help others avoid similar pain. I turned to William. So that's your choice. Give my declined portion to Vanessa, knowing that doing so would confirm everything I've ever suspected about where your priorities truly lie. Or redirect it to the foundation, which would at least attempt to create something meaningful from this family's legacy of secrets. William looked older than I'd ever seen him. You've thought this through carefully. I have, I acknowledged. More carefully than any of you thought through the decisions you made about my life without my knowledge or consent. And if we choose the foundation, Elizabeth asked. What then, for this family, I mean? I took a deep breath. Then I would be willing to maintain civil contact, holiday cards, perhaps occasional dinners, but with boundaries and with honesty going forward. No more lies, no more pretending we're a perfect family. And if we choose Vanessa, William asked quietly, then we're done, I said simply. I walk away completely with no regrets and no looking back. I build my life with the people who see me for who I am and value me accordingly. I glanced at Claire and Thomas, who had remained respectfully silent throughout the conversation. William and Elizabeth exchanged a long look, 30-plus years of marriage, allowing for silent communication that spoke volumes. Vanessa stared at her hands, uncharacteristically subdued. I think William finally said that the foundation sounds like a worthy endeavor, one that Grandpa Mitchell himself might have approved of in his own way. I nodded, unexpected emotion welling up in my throat. It wasn't forgiveness that would take much longer if it ever came at all. But it was a step, a recognition, an acknowledgement of wrongs done, and a commitment to something better. I'll have my lawyer contact you with the details, I said, maintaining my composure. The trustees will need to formally approve the plan, of course. As they prepared to leave, Vanessa hung back. Alex, she said quietly, I truly am sorry. Not just because my plan backfired, but because I see now how wrong it was from the beginning. How wrong I've been for years. I looked at my sister, my half-sister, my childhood companion, my recent betrayer. I believe you're sorry, Vanessa. But trust has to be rebuilt over time, not restored in a single conversation. She nodded, accepting this. For what it's worth, I'll fully support the foundation. In any way I can. After they left, I sat between Claire and Thomas on my sofa, an unusual family unit forged through decades of secrets and a week of painful truths. "Are you okay?" Claire asked, putting her arm around my shoulders. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I think I will be." Thomas reached over and squeezed my hand. "You were magnificent, Alex. Turning pain into purpose, that way it's a rare gift." "I learned it from necessity," I said. When you grow up feeling like you don't quite belong, you either break or you find ways to create belonging on your own terms. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could go back and do it all differently. Give you the honesty and openness you deserved from the beginning." "We can't change the past," I reminded her, echoing my own words from a week earlier. "We can only decide what to do next." And what came next would surprise us all. 1 year later, I stood at a podium in the ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston, addressing the 200 guests who had gathered for the inaugural gala of the Alexandra Claire Mitchell Foundation for Adoption Transparency and Support. When I declined my inheritance to establish this foundation, I thought I was making a statement about justice. About turning decades of family secrets into something that could help others avoid similar pain. What I didn't expect was how this act of transformation would transform me as well. The past year had been extraordinary by any measure. William had not only directed my declined portion of the trust to the foundation, but had personally matched it with an equal contribution from his own funds. Elizabeth had surprised everyone by volunteering to serve on the Foundation's Family Outreach Committee, bringing her considerable social connections to bear in building support for our mission. Vanessa, true to her word, had offered her legal expertise pro bono, helping draft policy recommendations for adoption reform that we were now lobbying for at the state level. Claire had moved from Connecticut to Boston, taking an apartment just a few blocks from mine. Our relationship had evolved cautiously, but steadily navigating the complex territory between biological mother and daughter, former aunt and niece, between past secrets and present honesty. We weren't quite mother and daughter in the conventional sense, too much time had passed for that, but we were something equally meaningful. Two women with shared blood and shared values, building a new kind of family bond on their own terms. Thomas had extended his Boston stay, indefinitely renting a brownstone in Back Bay and opening a small consulting office for sustainable architectural design. We had dinner together every Sunday, gradually filling in the gaps of our lost decades, discovering shared tastes in music, art, and literature that couldn't be explained by anything other than genetics. He never tried to be the father he hadn't been allowed to be during my childhood, but he became a steadfast presence, a source of unconditional support that I had never experienced from William. As for the Mitchell family dynamics, they had shifted in ways none of us could have predicted. The foundation had created a new focal point for family energy and resources, one built on principles of honesty and repair rather than appearances and control. William and Elizabeth remained somewhat formal, still more comfortable with practical matters than emotional ones, but they were actually trying to build a more authentic relationship with me. And Vanessa. Vanessa had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. The public humbling of her failed exclusion plot combined with the revelation that I was indeed blood family had cracked something in her carefully constructed persona. Through her work with the foundation, she had encountered adoptees and birth parents whose stories resonated with our own complicated family history. She had begun therapy examining the privilege and entitlement that had led her to behave so cruelly toward me. 2 months ago, she had asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. "I've been thinking about that dinner," she said, stirring her latte nervously. "About the bill I tried to stick you with." I nodded, waiting. We hadn't discussed that night directly since our confrontation at my apartment a year earlier. I want to make it right, she continued. Not just with apologies, but with actions. She reached into her bag and pulled out a check. $3,120.47. The exact amount of that bill. I'd like to donate it to the foundation in your name if that's okay. I stared at the check, then back at my sister's face, seeing genuine remorse and a desire for reconciliation. It's not about the money, Vanessa. It never was. I know, she said quietly. It's about what the money represented. My attempt to exclude you to assert some kind of superiority or greater belonging. I was wrong, Alex. So wrong. And while I know this gesture is mostly symbolic, symbols matter. Stories matter. And I want our family's story to have a better ending than the one I nearly gave it. I had accepted the check and suggested we use it to fund a specific initiative, emergency financial assistance for adoptees in crisis, ensuring that no one would have to endure public humiliation for financial reasons while dealing with the emotional complexities of adoption and identity. Now looking out at the gala audience, a mix of wealthy donors, adoption advocates, and families with adoption in their histories, I continued my speech. Family is both simpler and more complicated than most of us are taught to believe. Simpler because at its core, family is about love, acceptance, and belonging. More complicated because these things don't always follow bloodlines, legal documents, or social expectations. I saw Claire and Thomas sitting together at a front table, both beaming with unmistakable pride. William and Elizabeth were at the next table, more reserved, but clearly supportive. Vanessa stood at the back of the room helping coordinate the event, staff having insisted on taking an active role in the evening's logistics rather than simply attending as a guest. The Foundation's work over the past year has already made meaningful differences in many lives, I continued. We've helped 37 adoptees access their original birth certificates and connect with birth families. We've provided counseling services to over 100 individuals navigating the complex emotions of adoption reunion. We've drafted policy recommendations that have gained bipartisan support in the state legislature. I paused, looking around at the faces, watching me some strangers, some new friends, some family in various configurations of blood and choice. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome has been the healing within my own family. When I declined my inheritance and proposed this foundation, I thought I was choosing justice over reconciliation. What I've discovered is that sometimes justice creates the conditions for reconciliation to become possible. I hadn't planned to share the most recent development in our family saga, but standing there feeling the weight and the lightness of the past year, I decided to take a chance on vulnerability. 3 weeks ago, my sister Vanessa and I sat down with all the legal documents related to my adoption and the family trust. Together, we went through every paper, every deception, every manipulation. Not to reopen wounds, but to finally understand the complete truth. What we discovered was something none of us had known. I saw Vanessa nod encouragingly from the back of the room, giving me permission to continue. My grandfather Mitchell, the man who established the trust that inadvertently set this whole journey in motion, had included a private letter to be opened only if there was ever a dispute about the beneficiaries. In that letter written 30 years ago, he acknowledged me not just as a Mitchell by adoption, but as his biological grandchild through his son Thomas. He wrote that while the circumstances of my birth were unfortunate by the standards of our social circle, blood was blood, and he had made provisions to ensure I would never be excluded from my rightful place in the family. I smiled at the memory of reading that letter, of feeling a connection across time to a grandfather who had appeared cold and distant in life but had in his own way tried to protect me. He also wrote something that has stayed with me, that has become something of a mission statement for both this foundation and my personal journey. He said, "Family secrets poison the roots of the family tree. Truth, however painful, is the only soil in which healthy branches can grow." The room was silent, absorbing the wisdom from an unexpected source. The Mitchell family tree has been pruned quite severely by truth over the past year, I said, allowing myself a small laugh. But new growth is emerging, stronger, healthier, and more authentic than what came before. And that ultimately is what this foundation is about, creating space for truth to do its difficult, necessary work of clearing ground for new beginnings. The applause that followed was warm and sustained. As I stepped away from the podium, I caught Vanessa's eye across the room. She mouthed, "Thank you," and I nodded in acknowledgement. We weren't the sisters we had pretended to be for 32 years. But we were becoming something else, something real, built on shared history, difficult truths, and the choice to move forward together rather than apart. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, I found myself standing with Claire, Thomas, William, Elizabeth, and Vanessa, my complicated, imperfect family in all its reconfigured glory. Well, William said, more emotional than I had ever seen him, "I think Grandpa Mitchell would be proud of what you've built, Alex." "What we've built," I corrected gently. "All of us together." Elizabeth reached out hesitantly and took my hand, a rare physical gesture from a woman who had always maintained careful distance. "I know I wasn't the mother you deserved," she said, "but I'm grateful for the chance to be whatever we can be to each other now." "Family," I said simply, "on new terms, but still, family." As we stood there, an unconventional family portrait of biological connections and chosen bonds, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until that moment. The $3.120 dinner bill that Vanessa had tried to saddle me with a year ago had been the most valuable check I'd never paid. It had been the price of admission to the truth, the cost of breaking free from decades of lies. The investment that had yielded returns beyond any inheritance. I had lost the family I thought I had, but gained the family I actually needed, one built on honesty, accountability, and the radical notion that belonging is something we create together, not something bestowed by blood or withheld by secrets. And that in the end was worth more than any trust fund could provide. Wow, what a journey we've been on together. I hope my story of family betrayal and unexpected redemption resonated with you in some way. If you've ever experienced family secrets or complicated relationships, drop a comment below and let me know if you found healing like I did. The lesson I learned is that sometimes what seems like the ultimate betrayal can lead to the most authentic connections if we're brave enough to face the truth. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and family karma stories. Sharing is caring. So if you know someone who might need to hear that family, healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals, please share this video with them. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, and remember that sometimes the most beautiful family trees grow from pruned and damaged roots. See you in the next story.